Hey everybody, it's PartyElite, and today I'm kicking off my beginner's guide to Distant Worlds 2, an extremely complex sci-fi strategy game with tons of interesting intertwined systems that can be as daunting as they are fun. I intend to do a few videos that dive deeper into some of the more complex systems, but today's video will focus on core aspects of a variety of core systems so that you can get a handle on things across the board and get playing right away. The sections are all time-stamped down below if you want to hop around, and if you have any specific questions or topics you'd like to see explored, let me know in the comments down below, and I'll try and answer what I can, or plan the rest of the series accordingly. And if you haven't yet grabbed the game, you can do so at the link I've provided in the description down below to support the channel as you do. Now, with no more time to waste, let's begin. Automation policies and a detailed UI. With a number of moving parts Distant Worlds 2 has, it can get a little overwhelming even if you're super familiar with the game, so I highly recommend the first thing you do is open up your Policies tab and figure out what you want control over and what you want to be automated. Keep in mind that every new game you start will remember these settings and start with them, so make sure you update them accordingly. Here you'll be able to change settings for a vast number of items, flipping between the AI controlling it, yourself controlling it, or in some cases, the AI giving you advice and acting on it automatically, or the AI giving you advice and letting you choose to go with it or ignore it. If you want to completely ignore certain responsibilities, you can hand them off to the AI and focus on everything else yourself instead. It's a great way to focus your learning of the game if you need it, and it's a great way to ignore what you don't care about since the AI is quite trustworthy in my experience so far. You can further customize this automation at a granular level if you want, fine-tuning AI behavior outside of recommended settings. I would advise that beginners perhaps start with a few systems automated and other systems set to manual or advice mode so that you can get really familiar with some systems before trying to broaden your scope. Eventually, you'll find the perfect mix of automated features you don't want to deal with, like having to manually upgrade your ship and base designs after every single upgrade is unlocked one tech at a time, and those you do want to deal with, like actually picking what to research. There's a further level of granularity in some cases. For example, if you want to automate most colonies but manually control some, you can change specific colonies' automation rules. If you want to control some of your fleets manually but tell others to automatically defend the system they're in or automatically escort ships or, well, you can see the options here. You can do exactly that. I personally like to keep construction ships fully automated so that I can just commission a station when I want, and the AI will determine the best ship for the job without me needing to remember to manually assign one. You can also specify if you want ship upgrades, designs, or retrofits to be automated on a granular level in the ship design screen by clicking on the indicators here. Mining ships, freighters, and passenger transports are almost always fully automated, and we'll touch more on that later, but all other ships can have their automation tweaked as you like. One more thing I'll mention is that you should spend some time really exploring all the tabs in these menus here. They do an excellent job of collecting all sorts of relevant information, keeping things organized, allowing you to give orders and find new locations for all sorts of potential types of exploitation. Make use of the automation and the breadth of presented information in Distant Worlds 2. It'll help you get familiar with the game, and it'll make your life easier even when you're comfortable with it. The two-tier economy. The economy in Distant Worlds 2 exists in a two-tier system, one which you control, the state economy, and one which you do not, the private economy. Despite the lack of control over the latter, you still influence it in many ways, which in turn impacts your empire's wealth and stability. You need both working optimally for best results. The state economy most consistently derives its income from colony taxes and any diplomatic tributes you may have arranged, though at times, as relevant, it will also see varying degrees of bonus income from things like tourism, fuel, trade, and shipbuilding. These are all derived from actions taken by the private economy, and I'll explain what that means in just a moment. Focusing on the state economy first, it's important to know where your colony tax number comes from, as it's the biggest constant source of cash flow right from the start of a new game. Each colony has a few key numbers that tie into the economy. The important ones are visible in the menu here when you select a colony, but diving into the detailed view, you can see more details. Revenue represents how much money the private economy is generating on this specific colony. Revenue, after being reduced by corruption, is taxed at the current tax rate, and from that, colony support costs are deducted to give you your net tax revenue. This final number is what the colony provides your state economy in the form of colony tax, and the sum of net tax revenue across all your colonies will give you this number. Newer colonies, or colonies on planets that are less hospitable to your chosen species, or colonies that are far too populated over its limit, will have higher support costs, meaning they are quite an expensive investment that you need to prepare and save for. This is doubly true for new colonies because the revenue of a colony is determined by its population and development, both things that start extremely low at a new colony. This means that a new colony will have extremely low revenue to the point of not being worth taxing, and it'll still have massive support costs, resulting in a net negative by a significant margin. A necessary investment, but not one to jump into too early. As you can see, it's essential to push up population and colony development while keeping corruption as low as possible. You can tweak tax rates as needed using a quick hike to get a momentary boost at times, but be sure not to let high tax rates cause too much unhappiness or corruption. The latter needs to be countered with certain buildings you'll be able to build with the right research done, while the former can lead to an open rebellion or mass migration and population drop should you or another empire have a colony worth escaping to. That can be countered with reduced tax rates on some of your colonies, as well as the appropriate goods. And that's where the private economy kicks in. At the start of a new game, until you research tech for tourism and passenger transport, the private economy primarily focuses on the movement of goods. In order to do this, the private economy will seek to build mining ships and freighters to acquire and distribute the resources you've discovered. The construction of these ships can only be done at state-run facilities. The private economy will automatically commission the building of the ships they need at shipyards on your colonies and at your stations, and that money they invest will go directly into your pocket as bonus income. Further down the line, you'll be selling fuel to private ships, you'll be establishing tourist resorts for private use, and you'll be trading with foreign empires, and these will all count as bonus income too. But again, for starters, it's the construction of those mining ships and freighters that'll do the heavy lifting. These private investors need to have private cash on hand so they can afford the ships they need, but they'll only spend that cash if there are viable resources to tap into. The private economy also automatically takes advantage of your fuel tankers, available after the appropriate technology has been researched, paying a fee every time they refuel. When tourist resorts are built, the private economy will build and use passenger ships to ferry them over to the resorts, and foreign empires might send their tourists over to your resorts as well. Every time an individual arrives at your resorts, you make money, whether they're from your empire or not. Finally, establishing a trade agreement with a foreign empire will encourage your freighters to exchange goods from both sides of the deal, and based on the price of the goods, buffs from researched components, and the treaty itself, each such delivery will provide some bonus income as well. As you can see though, colony revenue ties into the private economy as well. So, development and population in your colonies are important here as well. And though these will have a natural growth, you'll want to encourage the private economy in the right ways to help them along. Chase the right resources. Unless you're playing as the Mercantile Guild government type, you have zero direct control over what your private economy does, which in turn means you cannot directly control what resources you acquire. Mercantile guilds have a slight degree of direct control, but what we're about to discuss here still mostly applies to them as well. Through the use of directed exploration and mining stations, and later on resort bases and trade deals, you can nudge the private economy along based on your needs. I prefer, in the early game especially, to set exploration policies to manual for this exact reason. As your exploration ships scout out asteroids and planets and moons across various systems, they'll report back any locations that have resources available. After resources are found, your private industry weighs the supply and demand for said resource, and if it deems the resource worthwhile, it'll either reassign existing mining ships to go acquire it, or it'll commission the construction of new mining ships, providing a cash injection to your bonus income, and then it'll send those new mining ships over instead. Resource acquisition involves mining ships physically taking the time to go to where the resource is, mining it, and then bringing it back to where it's needed. Resources aren't magically shared across your empire. They need to be physically moved from where they are to where they're needed. This applies when they're first acquired, and this applies when they need to be transported by a construction ship to a new construction site, or by a freighter from one colony to another, or whatever the case might be. Your private economy deciding where to invest its time and efforts isn't a bad thing, and in fact, it's the bedrock of your state economy. But sometimes your private economy will focus on resources that align with their needs to make profits, but might not align with your strategic needs. Resources the state might need to build certain components on your ships, to help fight plague on your colonies, to begin researching a new technology, etc., etc. And sometimes your private economy simply won't pursue newly discovered resources, content instead with what they're already working with, neither building new mining ships nor acquiring resources that you just discovered and you'd like to have. This is where mining stations come in handy. Deposits found by exploration ships will be counted as sources in the Resources tab, and their location will be listed under the New Mining Locations tab. Here you'll be able to see not just what's available and where, but also how efficiently it can be extracted. You can also see this information on the details screen when you have a viable celestial body selected. Red lines around a resource indicate that there is a higher demand than supply and might be worth prioritizing, and the little percentage value next to any resource icon represents how quickly resources can be mined off of that location. It's labeled as abundance, but don't worry, it cannot be depleted. A lower percentage is simply an indicator of reduced mining speed and efficiency for that resource at that location. Using the New Mining Locations tab is the fastest way to build new mining stations, but make sure you zoom out and hover over potential locations to see where they are to take into consideration the distances. Travel time still matters even when using a mining station. You can also select your target celestial body in the map and use the build menu down here. Building mining stations doesn't actually take money from your state economy. The state isn't actually building these mines. You're simply providing a license to a private entity to do so. There are other stations that behave in this way, and it'll always be marked as such. Once built, the mining station will constantly pull resources from the location it's built on. In the case of asteroids, it'll pull resources from multiple locations in its vicinity, but in the case of planets and moons, it'll only mine the designated celestial body. This frees up your mining ships to mine elsewhere, and the private economy will now invest in freighters to simply move resources from the mining station over to where it's needed instead. Freighters are typically able to move faster than mining ships, and with some light customization, they can quickly be edited to carry more cargo per round trip too, shipping more resources around more quickly. Apart from picking where and when to tap into resources, you also need to consider which resources to prioritize. There are 3 types of resources: construction, fuel, and luxury. There's just the one fuel resource, so it doesn't need much thought applied to it, but construction resources are needed at colonies to promote population growth and for building construction, and they're also needed at colonies and space stations to facilitate research as well as ship and station construction. Certain technologies require a resource investment to begin research, and different ships will need different resources to build based on their components. More on that in just a little bit. This will, however, often be a determining factor of which resources you prioritize. Beyond that are the luxury resources. These all have different impacts, and you'll want to consider your current circumstances to determine which ones to prioritize. Some luxury resources will boost colony income, while others will boost colony happiness, allowing for higher tax rates or making up for worse living conditions. Some luxury resources help fight plague, only really needed when one is ravaging a colony, and others will help boost population growth and colony development, again, key contributors to a colony's revenue as discussed in the previous section. Sometimes you'll want direct control over where resources end up so that you can promote specific results at specific colonies. A boost to colony income is worth very little at a new colony, for example, so your private economy probably shouldn't waste time and resources shipping such resources to said new colony. In order to do that, not only will you want to promote the acquisition of resources through mining stations, but you might want to use manual stock levels to set just how much of any given resource should be maintained at any given colony accordingly. Keep in mind that Building new mining locations will encourage the private economy to build more freighters. Building new resort locations will encourage them to build more passenger ships, and exploring new deposits and colonizing additional planets will encourage them to build mining ships and freighters accordingly, all of which give you cash injections as a result of shipbuilding. Make sure to take advantage of those cash injections. They can make a huge difference. But on the topic of colonies, let's discuss paced expansion. Distant Worlds 2 puts a fair bit of weight on time to travel and distances, and you need to take them into consideration when you expand your empire. For one, before you send your exploration ships out to distant systems to scout them out, note that the standard pre-warp game start setting does not have faster than light travel right off the bat. Your ships will take a long time just to get to the closest planet in your own system, and you can forget about interstellar travel at first. Not that the game will stop you from trying, though. Some of the earliest technology worth investing in then are skip drives. These will open your own system up for exploration and mining, as your ships will move quickly enough from planet to planet, but the closest other systems are still quite far away, and each start is different, so take into consideration the distance to the nearest other system. Typically, the stable warp fields will make it plausible to explore nearby systems. Note that with an exploration ship selected, you can hold down Control and right-click on a system to order exploration versus simply moving over to the location instead. And remember to use the Exploration tab to keep an eye on idle ships, select them, and give them new orders. As you develop your hyperspace technology further and further, it'll become more viable to expand your empire further and further as well. Remember that it's not just about establishing mining stations or colonies in far-off systems. Ships need to travel back and forth constantly for various purposes for you to glean any actual value from your expansion, and should these far-off stations and colonies be attacked by another empire, or pirates, or perhaps space creatures, you want to make sure your fleets can respond quickly enough. A slow jump speed won't cut it, making your defenses and your economy both less efficient, so make sure to pace your expansion. Your ships will also have limited fuel, and when they run out of fuel, their speed drops to 1/3 of its potential total. Fuel here isn't just what powers propulsion, mind you. Fuel is converted into energy, and energy is needed for everything a ship does, from moving to shooting to mining and more. If you're playing with manual settings, you need to tell ships when to refuel at the closest station by clicking this button here. While exploring, you should also keep an eye out for and navigate around any nebulae that can neutralize your ships, leaving them stuck in place. Separate to pacing your exploration, remember to pace your colonial expansion as well. As mentioned previously, colony support costs are higher on less suitable worlds, and even on ideal worlds, colony support costs will outweigh revenue for a while, so you want to make sure you have the money saved up before colonizing. You'll also want to ensure you have the tech for passenger ships to transport migrants to the new colony, and you'll want to ensure the new colony has a high happiness value through low taxes and the right goods to actually encourage that migration. This will help grow that colony's population faster, offsetting its support costs sooner, but it'll still take quite a bit of time to balance out. Be very careful about colonizing multiple planets at once unless you can afford that investment. Protect your interests. Foreign empires, pirates, space aliens, and rebellious colonies are all cause for concern, and apart from pacing your expansion to your economy, you'll want to keep up with defensive capabilities to protect your interests too. Though most of the action in Distant Worlds 2 takes place in space, you cannot leave your planets undefended. Pirates will attempt to raid them, and rebellions can overthrow you in an instant if you don't have troops recruited to stop them. To recruit ground troops, simply select the colony, go to Manage Troops, and click here to recruit. Early on, you won't need too many of these guys, and you can make do with just a few, but remember to do the same on new colonies to ensure that raiders aren't able to cause too much trouble, and keep in mind that you will have to pay recruitment and maintenance costs. Keep in mind also that you need to select a unit and tell it to be garrisoned to ensure your troop transport ships don't pick them up by mistake when you're planning an invasion of your own. As you research the appropriate technology, you'll unlock upgrades to your troops, and you'll also unlock other troop types with different advantages worth considering, and buildings that can provide various defenses will be unlocked too. Defending the ground is somewhat simple. Space gets a bit more involved. All ships are able to mount weapons, but civilian ships only have so many hardpoints for them, and often it's a waste of resources to slap a small weapon on a ship when you could instead derive more value out of it elsewhere, like a mining ship with more cargo capacity instead of the 27th century equivalent of a Nerf gun. It's not a bad idea to research shields, armor, and higher level weapons early on to upgrade your stations, but these guys will only be able to defend the area in their immediate vicinity. Plenty of action can and will happen just outside their reach, and the last thing you want to do is let some pirates sneak onto your colony by simply attacking from a different angle. To that end, you'll want to research frigates pretty urgently. Frigates are the second tier of military ships, and while there are viable uses for Tier 1 escort ships that we'll discuss in a future video, you're much better off having frigates on hand to help fend off pirates in the early game, unless you're willing to pay them a tribute to keep them off your back. It's a good idea to station frigates near high-value targets. Having a handful stationed just outside a new colony before it's got ground troops in place, for example, is not a bad idea. Stations that are constantly being attacked by multiple enemy ships at a time can also end up overwhelmed even when upgraded, and they might warrant extra protection too. Outside of these manual orders though, you can automate your ships to defend your empire quite effectively on their own. By default, new ships are built and set to be fully automated, and they'll do a variety of things including escort individual ships to and from their destinations. This can be at least somewhat overboard early on especially, so you'll instead want to set them specifically to automate as defenders. Select a handful of frigates and assign them to a new fleet, and then tell the fleet to defend, providing specific instructions if you so desire. Depending on how you expand and what level of hyperspace tech you're at, you might want a defensive fleet for each system you're operating in for rapid response, or you might be able to make do with just one fleet covering a few systems each. Though, be prepared for attacks on multiple fronts at times and expand your navy accordingly, while keeping an eye out, of course, for maintenance costs. Find the perfect balance of automation that works for you, but make sure to protect your interests in one way or another. You'll eventually need to defend your supply lines, passengers, and colonies not just from pirates, but from empires you're at war with too. Losing a vital mining operation or access to a core strategic resource is a quick way to end up on the back foot, and there's nothing quite like watching a foreign army raze your planets because you forgot to recruit a proper garrison. Assigning characters. Characters are an integral part of your operation across multiple facets, and properly assigning them to tasks is an important point of consideration. Characters aren't particularly complex entities here, but make sure you pay attention to new arrivals when the notification pops up and assign them tasks in order to improve them and take advantage of them. Some characters will start with skills when they arrive, and these will impact how you might want to use them. For example, if one of your generals applies a malice to recruitment rate, you might not want to assign them to a location where you're about to undergo a massive recruitment drive. He might give a great buff to the units after they're recruited though, and that would make him a great general after recruitment is done. Little things like this add up, but are quick enough to manage, though I'd advise periodically checking on your characters list to make sure you've got them all assigned to the right spots, and to make sure you haven't missed any new skills and traits. Skills and traits are discovered and acquired over time after a character has been working for long enough, and they will develop over time as they operate as well. Make sure to assign missions to spies, starting with counterintelligence where they can hopefully safely grow their skills before being sent off to get caught, and make sure scientists, generals, admirals, and ambassadors are assigned locations where they'd be most useful. It takes time for characters to travel from where they are to where you assign them, so don't leave this to the last minute. Remember also that admirals are assigned to fleets, not individual ships. That means you need to create a fleet first in order to utilize your admirals. Remember as well that you can dismiss characters that have proven useless, that might be causing you trouble, such as through being a double agent, or that might be grinding your empire to a halt. Yes, even a leader can be dismissed should they grow problematic. It's not the same as a whole revolution that changes your government type, but it can save you from particularly detrimental negatives. Make sure to use your characters as needed. It's easy to forget about them at this scale of operation at times, but they can make quite an impact, and their absence, or in some cases presence, can be hurting you in ways you might not have realized. Maximize research. Better diplomatic relations, better returns on trade deals, more efficient travel times, more damage output, stronger defenses. It doesn't matter what angle you're looking at, focusing on, or hoping to win a game with, appropriately approaching research can make or break your empire. When starting a new game, there are a few options that can make technological development more or less chaotic. You can play using a preset and visible tech tree where you know exactly what to research to get what you want. You can opt to randomize the tech tree to add a touch of uncertainty as to what will be available and when, and you can choose to hide everything except for the next step in the tech tree, which means you won't know what your path might look like and will have to make educated guesses instead. No matter which one you choose, there are some factors that apply across the board. For one, make sure to dedicate some money to science. You're able to adjust how much of your budget is dedicated to colony growth versus scientific progress. The former helps your economy over time, as described in prior sections of this video, while the latter directly speeds up research, allowing you to progress through the tech tree faster. The more money you pour into science, the more of a boost you'll see, so feel free to even reduce how much money gets set aside for your reserves to put even more into science. Keep in mind that there are baseline maintenance costs that need to be paid before you can start pouring money into the sciences, so you might want to adjust tax rates if you can to overcome that monetary hurdle. Apart from that, you'll typically have to invest a small sum of money and some resources to begin researching a technology in the first place, and you can almost always invest a huge sum of money into a technology you're researching in order to have the time it'll take to research it. Sometimes this will trigger automatically and for free, while at other times you'll want to part with your wealth to hurry something along. Keep this option in mind for emergencies or when you want to accelerate certain progress. The overall population in your empire also helps hurry research along, and as you can imagine, more advanced technology takes longer to research, and so it takes the economic might and manpower of a large empire to make the research time on them viable. And when I say large, I mean wide or tall. You don't need to span half the galaxy to be technologically powerful. A few well-maintained colonies can be as viable as several poorly developed ones. Apart from this type of budget investment, make sure to research higher-level research labs to use on your research stations and spaceport, and make sure to seek out viable locations for said research stations and spaceports as well. Spaceports can only be built around colonies, and research stations can't just be built anywhere either. While there are an associated construction and maintenance cost to them, the boosts they can give to your research speeds are nothing to scoff at. You can keep up with said viable locations by using the new Research Locations tab, but note that not all research locations are equal. Some will boost specific topics of research, others will have broader applications, but whatever the case may be, having additional research stations to bolster your research rates is better than not. The time to get picky is when there are multiple choices and some are clearly better than others and money is tight. Again, there are construction and maintenance costs involved. You can assign scientists to individual research stations, and perhaps most important to note is that you can research multiple technologies at the same time at the cost of the speed of research for any given one. When you have more than one research station built, you can research that many number of technologies simultaneously, up to a maximum of 6, determined by this number over here. Whether you choose to research multiple technologies more slowly at the same time, or you instead opt to focus on fewer technologies to research more quickly, both approaches are viable depending on other factors. A very populous empire or one with a large science budget might be able to quickly research multiple lower-level technologies at the same time without missing a beat, but should an emergency arise and the need for specific weapons or diplomatic technology become paramount, or if you desperately want a higher-level technology, you might want to shift priorities and go into a more focused approach instead. Technological advancements leads to a variety of upgrades across a variety of fields, and sometimes you'll need to research multiple technologies to do things that the game might imply possible with just one. For example, colonization ship hulls are unlocked separately from colonization modules, but you need both to actually colonize. The same goes for tourism and recreation modules. Technology opens up a lot of options across the board, but by and large they unlock new components and hulls, which takes us to ship design essentials. This topic alone could be another huge video of its own, and while I'll probably be making one just like that, I wanted to include this vital section here so that you have at least something to start with. If you'd be interested in such a deep dive video, let me know in the comments down below. Now, the first order of business is to understand automation settings here. You'll quite likely, especially as a beginner, want to automate ship and base designs completely, only stepping in to customize things from time to time. This is because otherwise, you might forget to establish upgraded designs for certain ship types and only realize when you see the results of your mistake, possibly very expensive results. If you do decide to manually design ships, it can be tremendously fun, but also complicated. I'd suggest auto-generating or upgrading old designs to have a foundation from which to work, at least at first. This means the task will be partially automated, even when set to manual in your policies. Note also that a new ship design doesn't automatically apply to existing ships. They need to be told to retrofit, and if you have multiple active options for a certain class of ship or station, you need to tell them what to retrofit into. Private economy ships will automatically handle retrofitting since you don't have control over their ships, but remember to actually design upgrades for their ship types with newer parts as they come. Private ships are not allowed to retrofit to a ship design that doesn't actually exist, and there's nothing like having your upgraded exploration ship find great resources at the next system over, and then watching 20 mining ships spend 3 lifetimes trying to get there because you forgot to design a version that actually has hyperspace technology. When designing a ship, you need to consider its size, its crew, and its energy consumption. Every hull has a maximum size it can support, and it has a minimum amount of that taken up by the hull itself. Every bay has a type indicated by its color, and a maximum size that it can support too, and every component has a size that determines which bay it can fit into, and how much of the total available size it'll actually consume. Installing a size 10 module in a size 50 bay doesn't take up 50 size, it takes up 10. It's the size of the module that ultimately decides how much space you're taking up. But some modules are too big for some bays, and that's why bay size matters. A module cannot be installed in a bay that won't fit its size, and a ship that goes over its total size limit cannot be saved or produced. Some bays are external, indicated by the eye icon, and these are more susceptible to taking damage during combat, so you'll want to use these last if you can, since they're not as protected as internal bays. Almost all components require crew to function, and anytime you add a component, you'll see how much crew you need for the ship as a whole change over here. Crew systems add to the ship crew, and crew are also the ones involved in fighting back boarding parties should they come. Having extra crew as a result doesn't hurt, but don't overdo it. Each component takes up space and adds to construction and maintenance costs. They also add to energy drain. Fuel and energy are an interesting pair of considerations. Fuel isn't just for movement here, it's reactor fuel, and every unit of fuel is converted into energy at the rate shown here based on the type of reactor you're using. More reactors don't speed up this conversion rate, they simply allow for more energy to be stored or distributed at any given time, allowing for more powerful equipment to be used at once. Once depleted, energy will slowly be refilled at this rate. Without fuel, or without fuel cells to store said fuel, a ship can still function using energy collectors which work alongside reactors to collect energy and then disperse it among the various modules. I need to do some more experimentation, but my understanding is that collector efficiency is determined by proximity and the brightness of the closest sun. They are solar panels, and this means there's room for uncertainty and potentially dangerous variation depending on the ship type. Either way, this graph here will show you how much energy your ship's reactors generate and make available to your components, and a ship will always have a static energy cost, but it will also indicate energy consumed by all weapons when firing and by engines when moving through space. The latter will be one of the earliest issues you'll deal with, as even the lowly skip drive will often demand more energy than your initial ships can produce. You can see the red bar as well as the warning indicated up here, and the poor speed performance as a result here. Installing a second reactor is a quick fix for this kind of energy deficit early on, though higher level reactors will be made available through research down the line, allowing you to use a single bay and not have to worry about going over the ship's size limit as much. Do not take this warning lightly. It is a massive hit to your top speed and will absolutely cause a domino effect. We'll be going over more of these in depth in a later video, but there are a few other considerations I want to share right now. Remember to investigate enemy ships to see what their strengths and weaknesses are. Do they rely on short range and heavy shields or armor? Then use long-range weapons yourself to keep your distance, and maybe chase after weapon types that bypass their primary defenses. Weapons with shield bypass will have a chance of ignoring shield, and weapons with armor bypass will have a chance of, well, ignoring armor as long as there are no shields to stop them first. Ion weapons can bypass all defensive measures apart from ion defense specifically, and they can destroy components including hyperdrive systems. Let your immediate threats guide your hand in picking research and design, but keep your economy in mind when designing too. Not just the financial aspect, but the resources themselves. Different components consume different resources, and you'll want to make sure you're not designing ships that you can't actually build because you don't have access to the resources needed to do so. Ship design is complex, involved, and very rewarding if you find it interesting, and there's a lot more to talk about in a later video. If you're interested in such in-depth guide videos about Distant Worlds 2, again, let me know down below with a like and a comment. And if you have a specific topic you'd like to see covered, feel free to let me know that too. Don't forget to join the Discord linked in the description down below for a great place to hang out with folks into these kinds of games, including myself, and don't hesitate to subscribe to the channel for more strategy gaming news, reviews, previews, guides, and more. As always, a massive thanks goes out to all of my channel members and patrons who've been supporting the channel on a monthly basis. Y'all keep us alive and running smoothly. And of course, a big old thanks goes out to each and every one of you for watching. Until next time, cheers.